Hi everybody, welcome to the IMEX and Trace by Isla webinar about IMEX's sustainability strategy that's powered by Crowdcoms. Thanks very much for joining us on this, if you're in the UK, sunny as ever, August afternoon. I am Anna, I am the CEO and founder of Isla and joined today by David Harrison, the CFO at IMEX. So just a little bit, David, before we crack on, if you could give us a little bit of an overview about your journey into owning sustainability.
Sure, thanks Anna, and hi everyone, it's great to be on this call. So I'm David Harrison, I'm the CFO of the IMEX Group. And I've come into sustainability from a few different angles within that CFO portfolio. I guess initially it was from a risk point of view, in terms of the resilience of the business to climate change and climate risk. The second part is around governance. I own the governance portfolio, and it was about making sure we were doing the right thing, both in terms of legislation and just being a responsible corporate citizen. And then the third part was around corporate reporting. There's more and more corporate reporting, as everyone knows, around this area, and I wanted to be ready for that. So those were the sort of core elements of my CFO job that drove me in this direction. But as well as that, I wanted to find a way to give us a competitive advantage from doing the right thing in sustainability. I wanted people to look at IMEX as the right choice to attend or to exhibit at, from a sustainability point of view. So the competitive element was part of it as well. Third part of it is really around supporting the industry. So we do a lot in IMEX to support the industry. We serve on lots of boards around the industry. We support lots of initiatives. So really, I wanted us to be able to talk to sustainability in those forums. And then last but not least, from a personal point of view, this is really important to me personally. I wanted to make sure we were doing the right thing in sustainability from a personal point of view. And I guess as a legacy, one day I will leave IMEX, and I wanted to leave it in the right place in this respect. So those are the real reasons why I took this on board.
Thank you, David. I imagine that will resonate with a lot of leaders actually, as to how things come to be. Sustainability is sort of a value through to being a bit of a business strategy, and then also on the very human level, you know, we can see how the world's changing around us, and so wanting to do something about that. So I'm sure that resonates. I'm Anna, as I said, I'm the CEO of Isla. If you're familiar with Isla, great. If you're not, then we're an organisation that supports event industry businesses to transition in line with the need that is being driven by the planet to evolve when it comes to sustainability and deliver more responsible, responsive businesses to the climate crisis, essentially. And we've worked with IMEX for a number of years from a measurement perspective with Trace, the measurement platform that we run that's helped IMEX, and some of that's really been foundational in helping drive forward IMEX's sustainability strategy. So we have a preceding relationship before we started on this piece of work together, but this has been the combination of, well, nearly a year, I think, actually, is worth of work that is now out in the wild, and it's kind of still in play. But we wanted to share with you the building of the strategy. What is it and how did we get here, as a bit of a blueprint for the rest of the industry. In terms of IMEX, I'm sure it doesn't need any introduction or explanation, but for anyone who hasn't been, we've just got a short video which we'll be playing, and the role that will sort of help you get a sense of what IMEX is, the scale of the event, and sort of therefore the ambition of this strategy. So it's just a short video which will play imminently.
Everything you would ever want as an exhibitor and supplier, I would highly recommend. It wouldn't be a show I'd ever want to miss.
Thank you. So that should really kind of cement the variety of activity that happens at the show, the scale of the show, and also the fact that it happens twice a year, once in Frankfurt in Germany and then once in Las Vegas in the United States. And so kind of with that context, I'm going to throw to David just to talk a little bit about In the Moment, which is the title of the sustainability strategy, and why it resonates with you and with the IMEX team more broadly.
Thanks, Anna. So for me, this strategy is really important, and it really hits the mark in terms of what we need as a sustainability strategy for IMEX, for where we are at the moment. I think a lot of strategies in this area, they lose people because they focus on a point away into the future, often 2050, and it seems so far away, and the targets seem so distant and often seem unachievable, that we didn't want to have a strategy like that. We wanted something that was much more grounded and real and within reach. We recognize there's a lot to do. We recognize it's going to be difficult, but we also want to focus on what we can do in the moment. So what actions can we take day by day, year by year, to make a real difference in this area? And we also want something that the whole team can recognize and get behind and feel part of. Everyone in the business, across our business, and I guess across our supply chain and our stakeholder groups, can play a part in this strategy, and we want something that people can recognize. So that's the reason why we're talking about in the moment and looking at something that is tangible and real. But the other reasons why it resonates with me, I think partly because it's honest. It's very honest in terms of being realistic. We'll talk about some targets in a minute, but we wanted to have targets that we thought, yes, we can achieve those targets. They're still a stretch, but they're achievable. They're not just aspirational. They're not unachievable. I think also on the honesty point, I think we've been very rigorous in the work that we've done together to set our inventory, to set our boundaries, and we haven't left things outside that boundary just because it was too difficult. We've tried to take hard decisions to be real and honest about what we're trying to achieve and what we're accountable for. So that's the honesty piece. I think the other part of it is around the scope of what we're covering. We're covering the whole business. We're covering all of our shows, both of our shows, and our business operations. I know that other businesses might take a sample, but we didn't feel that was right, so we've taken the whole thing. And then finally, it's practical. So it's focused on the areas where we can make a real measurable difference. And when we look at the goals in a second, you can see what I mean by that. We focus on where the numbers are the biggest and where we can make a change. So for me, it's a really appropriate strategy. It really addresses where we are and where we're trying to get to, but also it fits with our values around honesty and practicality and deliverability.
Thank you. I think for us as well, in terms of building this, for ILA, building it with IMEX, it feels like a reflection of who you are as well as an organisation. I think that was really important, is that this isn't an abstract strategy that's kind of imparted by a consultancy. We've built this from an informed basis across the entire organisation, across all stakeholders, which again we'll come into. But I think that was really important for us when we partnered with you on this, was that it reflects your organisation and who you are and where you are and the role that you play in the industry. Because if it didn't do that, it will fall down. So it really needed to be part of the DNA of your organisation. So as David said, there's 4 goals embedded within the strategy that everything is shaped around. And those 4 goals are here on the screen. So we will go into each of them in detail, why that goal, how it was decided, what might people expect to see differently as a result, and just kind of talk around how they came to be so that you've got that context, because this is all about how we built this strategy. So the 4 goals are to reduce carbon emissions by 20% by 2050. It's about driving circularity in exhibitor participation, strengthening leadership alignment on sustainability, and also it's about supporting profitability through sustainability related initiatives. So we'll go through each of these and explain, like I say, why it's important, the rationale and how we got there. So kick-starting with the very first goal, to reduce carbon emissions by 20% by 2030. And this goal is based on a 2025 carbon emissions baseline for IMEX. So when in 5 years' time, when IMEX are reporting against this goal, it will be based on 2025 data and progress against 2025 data. And this is a really important goal, actually, because this is really what it's all about in terms of decarbonisation. Reducing the amount of carbon emissions that we're putting out into the atmosphere remains a priority, regardless of political and media headwinds. And so the current data that has been gathered shows that 89% of IMEX's carbon footprint comes from participant air travel. Which is obviously a huge contributing area. And one of the things that we kind of thought about within this as to why we targeted a 20% goal, is because decarbonising air travel, which is the big contributor, is completely outside of IMEX's control. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't, because something might change if it was, but it's outside of IMEX's control. And whilst the Paris Agreement, which is the global alignment on reducing emissions by 50% by 2030, that goal fundamentally ignores the fact that we are a global business travel industry. We bring people together, IMEX brings people together, and we have to recognise that. And I think that's what David's saying about that practicality component. So in terms of kind of the rationale, 20% is realistic, it's evidence-based, it's grounded in a very clear pathway as well, in the sense that the first 12% of that 20% emission is about removing short-haul flights, shifting short-haul flights in Europe to rail from Frankfurt, which is about a 3% year-on-year target. And I think that's about being really realistic. We're not going to be able to change everything overnight. And then the 8% left over is about emission reductions that can be unlocked through iteration, through supply chain engagement, through new initiatives, those sorts of things. A big part of this is that we do know that we're also missing some data. We have a goal, a sub-goal to measure booth emissions, because those at the moment are missing from this total footprint. We don't know what the exhibitor booth emissions footprint actually looks like, so we need to gather data and get evidence there, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next goal. But the 20% is about being realistic about what is achievable with a business model based on global business travel, and it's grounded in the evidence that we actually have about where emissions are coming from. David, do you want to just talk a little bit about how we got here and starting with the Net Zero Carbon Events Pledge in 2021?
Sure. Yeah. So as you say, we have pledged to the Net Zero Carbon Events initiative. We joined in 2021. I think, like a lot of people, we signed up to support the industry, and then we did the work to work out how we could deliver against it, and that's really where we are now. We've learned a lot in the last few years, but we've done a lot more work to dig into the numbers. We've got our, as I said earlier, our inventory, our boundaries, and I should say that's all on our website as well. It's all transparent. If you want to have a look at it, it's all there. But I think as we looked at that, we realised that achieving a 50% reduction was going to be unachievable without really changing the nature of the show. We're a trade show. We convene people. Traveling to the event is clearly very key to that event happening. So we couldn't just reduce our attendees by 50%, because that would just destroy the value and the ethos of the show. So therefore, it's about working out what is realistic. And as Anna said, it's about some incremental but still significant shifts in travel patterns for our European attendees.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that's a big part, is understanding where the control is, and that's why the data has been so important, because we can look at this number and say, right, well, 90% of our emissions come from air travel, and so what are we meant to do? 11% is irrelevant that we control, or we can't do anything about this. But I think having some of the detail around it, and I think one of the big things is how all the travel is made up, helps us set an actionable goal. So within this air travel number, we know that about 50% of participants in Europe, coming from Europe to the European show, are traveling by air. And we know that there are very good rail routes across Europe into Frankfurt. And so what that means is that whilst we could look at a big number like this, 89%, and say we can't do anything about it, the data that IMEX has actually been gathering about travel patterns, travel habits, where people are coming from and how they're getting there, have actually been used to inform that there are ways that IMEX can influence and shift and adjust travel behaviours so that this number may well come down slightly. So things that might change is that you might see from IMEX are things like normalising train travel as a first choice, improved communications on how to get to the European show, using social proof, videos, social media, normalising it for people, showing that it's doable, it's fun, it's actually often preferable to flying, might encourage uptake, and looking at more incentivization for trains. And again, I think the big part about this data is we know that IMEX have got two shows. They've got Frankfurt and Las Vegas. There is no other way to get to Las Vegas other than to fly. That's the reality. So what this data has allowed us to do and what this strategy has allowed us to do is to set a target that can really meaningfully move the dial in areas where there is control. This is about targeting, European participants traveling from Europe to a European show. And that means that the communications and marketing and hosted buyers and operations team can all focus their efforts there rather than blanket trying to get everybody to travel differently, which we know isn't feasible and possible. So again, that's about that practical element. If you do have any questions, by the way, please do pop them into the questions box, just so that we can capture them afterwards, or respond to them afterwards. But yes, moving on to the next goal, which is about driving circularity in exhibitor participation. Do you want to take this one on, David, just to explain this?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I guess in terms of where our carbon numbers lie, the biggest element is what we've just discussed in goal number 1 around travel. The next biggest one is around exhibitor participation. So this goal is around driving circularity in exhibitor participation. So that's all about the carbon impact of our stands, our booths at the event. What we're really looking to do is encourage our supply chain, so both exhibitors and stand builders, towards more reuse, more longevity, so more longer term use of assets, and more recovery. And we've set a sub goal, I think Anna mentioned earlier, around measuring that booth data, and we'd like to target 60%, recognizing that is a big challenge to get that much data out of our booth supply chain. But that's what we'd like to do to get some really robust data. I think it's important in this area because the industry, with some notable exceptions, the industry has a track record of the build and burn booths, that we have not enough circularity, not enough renewable supply chain here. So we really want to shift away from that linear system towards circularity and reduce the emissions, the cost, the waste that comes from the old way of working. So that's really why it's important. I think, Anna, you're going to talk about the rationale for this goal.
Yeah. So I mean, David's really captured it, which is that there are emissions that come from the materials that we're using and the waste that we're producing as a result of being exhibitors, essentially. And as David has mentioned, IMEX has actually included that within their boundaries, within their footprint scope. So although it's being produced by third parties, IMEX are recognising that it's material to the success of their business. And so that's why this is sitting within this goal. And I think that's really important because oftentimes something is directly financially or operationally outside of our control, and therefore we may assume or decide that it's not our responsibility to do anything about it, or that we can't do anything about it. But when it's actually materially relevant to the success of your organization, the economic success of your organization, ignoring it doesn't actually change the trajectory of it at all. So I think the importance of this is about providing data. So measuring the exhibitor booth emissions is about providing more data, which can help shape plans of action to decarbonise. And it's about participating in broader industry initiatives with regards to driving circularity, and participating in that. It requires everybody involved to change the sort of operating infrastructure, as it were, of disposable booths. And David, I mean, you might want to talk a little bit more about your involvement with Better Stands here.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Better Stands is a really key part of this, and it's a really simple framework. If you don't know about it, it's a fantastic initiative that was initially done by Informa and is now being spread across the industry. And it's a 10-point checklist for the renewable elements of your booth, of your stand. For IMEX Frankfurt 26, we did a full audit of all stands, or all space-only booths at our event, over 200 of them. And the data is pretty encouraging, actually. Over 70% of booths had an element of recyclability. So in other words, they were at least bronze on the bronze, silver, gold scoring of Better Stands. And 71% is a pretty good number, I think, and it's better than the pilot exercise data from last year. So we are very much behind Better Stands as a way of incentivizing and, I guess, showcasing good practice, best practice in our event. And also, it's something that exhibitors are really getting behind, and stand builders. We see elements of competition where stand A wants to know what stand B is doing to try and beat them at their sustainability performance. So we see elements of that sort of competition. And we also see ambition, if you like, to achieve the highest grades. So we had over 10 of the stands this year were gold, the top rating. A few fell short, but they all have a clear action plan to improve and to be gold, hopefully next time around. So it's a very simple thing, but it's actually working really well. It's really driving that ambition to be better. And it's I think it's a really solid part of this goal.
Yeah, thank you. I think further fleshing out this goal as well is a really important piece of information that helped us decide that this was an important and relevant one to include within IMEX strategy, is that from a survey of 1,000 respondents, 80% of them believe that standards should be in place for exhibitors. And that IMEX should set those standards. And I think this is a big part, is that saying the goals haven't come out of, isolation. They haven't just looked left and right and said, what's everybody else doing? It's been informed as well by IMEX's audience. And the reality here is that the 80% is across the board. I think it ranges from something like 79% to 82% of respondents across exhibitors, attendees, and the actual supply chain. This is saying that everybody is seeking out solutions, everybody wants guidance, everybody actually wants to drive this goal forward, and that there is a demand for this as well as a need. And I think that's really important. We know that we need to reduce carbon emissions, but there's not always necessarily a demand for solutions that drive that for aviation, for example. In this instance here, circularity and reducing waste, there's a huge demand for it. And I think it's because it's the most tangible visible part of our industry, and it's the bit that we do have the most control over. So I think that was really important, that this was in decision informed by the data. And so some of the commitments that IMEX have made are to introduce exhibitor sustainability standards from next year. And to grow them, they will be co-created with booth contractors rather than sort of imparted by IMEX. It's going to be a co-creation process. There isn't anything further at this moment in time to share on that. It's a plan in development, but this is going to change how sustainability comes to life at the show from 2027 onwards. And we should hopefully see things build over the coming years. So this is a really exciting goal, and very, very much aligned with industry ambitions to reduce waste across trade shows and exhibitions. Coming on to the third goal, strengthening leadership alignment on sustainability. I'll intro this one, shall I, David? Just because I think, again, this comes back to the survey that we did with regards to the stakeholders. So I mentioned we did a survey that had 1,000 respondents late last year. And one of the key things that we uncovered from that survey is that there seems to be a big disconnect between leaders and event practitioners, as it were, those leading organizations and leading businesses within the event sector versus those actually putting on the events themselves, the event professionals. So we found from the survey some quite interesting results, that leaders are far more likely to tune out when they hear sustainability or see sustainability related content. They were also more likely to experience fatigue when hearing about sustainability. Much more likely as well to feel optimistic that the industry would solve the challenge, but less likely to see sustainability as relevant to their role, which is really quite interesting because that's a big gap. Things don't change very often unless leaders drive that change. So if leaders aren't seeing this as important to their role, then the likelihood of these challenges being resolved are greatly reduced. So a big part of this goal specifically about strengthening leadership alignment is that there's a lot of noise, there's a lot happening within the industry, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of talk, but leaders aren't necessarily part of that conversation. And I don't know, David, whether, from your perspective, before you really kind of got into this, would you say that might have aligned with your experiences? Put you on
Yes,
the spot?
guilty. It was me. Yes, I very much felt that way. I think it's the third point there about the industry will solve the challenge. That's what resonated with me because I think we have signed up to various pledges, various initiatives, various standards, like a lot of people have across the business. And I think if you're maybe in a more senior role and you're not close to the detail, you think, well, that's enough. We've done that. We've agreed to do those things, so it will solve the challenge. But actually, there's clearly a lot more to it than that. So as I've become more involved in the detail, I've become less optimistic about the industry solving the challenge for us, and us needing to do more to solve it for ourselves.
Less optimistic about the industry, but more resolved to do something, which
Absolutely.
I guess is not the worst place to be coming from. There's no apathy in there, which I think is great. And we found that in terms of this goal, this is probably one of the slightly looser goals that we have, that IMEX is building a plan around, in that it's quite abstract. It doesn't have the same degree of metrics as 20% reduction in carbon or 60% exhibitor measurement of those sorts of things. This is really about trying to understand the role that IMEX can play in strengthening leadership alignment. The reality is that IMEX, well, not the reality, the wonderful thing about IMEX is that when we did the survey, IMEX was seen as so much more than just a trade show. It was sort of seen as an educator, as a thought leader, as a convener of the global industry. And that creates a wonderful environment for IMEX to start thinking about how it can play more of a role in strengthening that leadership alignment. I think something that's been really important to IMEX, and you may or may not wish to expand on this, David, was IMEX's kind of insistence, maybe not insistence is the right word, but IMEX's reflection that it's not for you to lead the conversation. You don't need to be to set the rules and set the parameters, but what you do need to do is be shown to be leading and to be acting, and that there was a difference and a nuance between those two things, that you didn't want to own the conversation about sustainability, but you wanted to kind of demonstrate through doing. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, absolutely. We're part of the conversation. We don't pretend to lead the conversation necessarily, but we're always part of it. We're at the table when these conversations are happening. So we want to bring as much value to that conversation as we can. And if we can bring something practical, if we can use our voice to amplify if we can explain what we've done and what works and what doesn't work, then, I think that's useful for people to hear.
Yeah, thanks. I think, in terms of what attendees or the IMEX audience might see change as a result, that one's a bit more fluid. We're not totally sure, but there will be sort of more consistent communications from IMEX about sustainability, and perhaps reframing it as more of a business strategy, and a practical thing that we can be doing at a business level strategically than perhaps some of the more tactical solutions or communications that may have appeared in the past. This is more about kind of really cementing this as a subject matter that's important at the leadership table, and being part of a strategy. So I think this is a watch this space, really. In terms of the fourth goal, I will let David introduce this one, what with him being a CFO. This goal is about supporting profitability. Oh, sorry, my phone's just started ringing. I don't know if you can hear that. Supporting profitability through sustainability related opportunities. So, David.
Yes, I do like this one as a CFO. I like all of them, just to say. Really, this is about making sure that whatever we're doing with sustainability, we're also thinking about commercials at the same time. We think there's an opportunity here to leverage our sustainability performance, to leverage our commercial performance. I guess the context is, we, like a lot of events, we operate within fixed constraints. We have a certain amount of space to sell and to operate in. The infrastructure around us is not always within our control, the geography, the dates, etc. We have lots of things that we can't really easily change, but we can try to optimize as much as we can within those constraints. And I think this is where the sustainability commerciality axis comes in. I think we do want to do as much as we can to really unlock the value of sustainability. I think at a simple level, using less and recycling more generally will save money. So there's a very sort of simple tactical thing there. But I think there's a bigger picture around adaptability and resilience, which is where I came in at the start, talking about risk and resilience. I think this is part of it. So it's about protecting value as much as about making profit. It's about protecting the value of the business and the product and the brand. And then finally, it's about making sure that when we are taking decisions, commercial decisions, we're bringing sustainability into that decision-making framework and vice versa. We've been doing a lot as a business around decision-making and making sure that we are as effective and consultative as we can be generally about decision-making. And for me, sustainability is just part of that jigsaw. So we're really working this year to upskill the team in sustainability so that when we are talking about maybe a procurement decision, a supplier selection decision, we're making sure that we're doing the right thing with the right data around sustainability. So part of it is supply chain, part of it is value chain, part of it is things like sponsorship, for example, where I think there's an opportunity to have more sponsorable assets with a sustainability element. So from whichever source it comes from, I think there's a role for sustainability to support profitability and longer term value.
Yeah. Thank you. I think to add to that, or to deepen a point that you made, is that there are evident sort of tactical opportunities, like, if you are using less or reusing more, for example, there are potential cost savings associated with that, which is obviously good for business. At the same time, I think it's fair to say that IMEX has invested a fair amount into sustainability over the years, into the way that you have been procuring, the way that, the services that you engage with, the measurement, the reporting. There's a lot that you have invested into sustainability, which does have a direct cost. I think it's important to recognise that while savings can be made, and oftentimes sustainability will help you save money, there is also an element that any good business will invest into its business to improve its opportunities, to manage its risks, to build resilience, and, like you say, to preserve value. So I think there's a balance between the opportunities present in a sustainability strategy that is designed to grow circularity and reduce emissions. And then there are also investment opportunities present through decisions that are made through a sustainability lens, that will deliver longer term value for the business as well. There's always a trade-off between what are we doing this quarter versus what's our aspiration for the next 3 to 5 years, those sorts of things. So it's really about understanding sustainability as a kind of commercial resilience, understanding sustainability for, you know, profitability, understanding sustainability in financial terms, not just in environmental or kind of value-based terms. So I think that's really important. Again, this strategy is new, so there are elements of the last goal and this goal that are still being worked through and understood how they can be rolled out, as it were. So watch this space as well in terms of what might change with regards to IMEX. And how IMEX adds value to its stakeholders through better sustainability initiatives, essentially. But yes, sustained investment requires commercial health. That was the next slide. In terms of the goals, just to recap on those are IMEX's 4 key goals: reduce carbon emissions by 20% by 2030, drive circularity and exhibitor participation, strengthen leadership alignment on sustainability, and support profitability through sustainability. Just again to reiterate, please do add questions and comments into the Q&A function. A lot of this has been made possible by the fact, before we come into questions, that IMEX has been measuring their carbon emissions for several years, and that has been really, really useful for them and informative in setting some of these targets and understanding where actions can be taken. So we have 2 resources here for you. You can download an event carbon measurement starter pack if you haven't yet started measuring your emissions. This kind of explains the process, how you do it, how to think about measuring, what you need to be collecting, and so on. We released this in partnership with IMEX, I think last year, and we've updated it for 2026. So you can scan that QR code on your screen. And the second thing is that if you would like to try trace as part of your measurement, then you can get a free demo here, again on the QR code, or you can contact us on the team. And I think some comments may be dropped in the chat for those links again. But really, it's an opportunity now for you to ask any questions that you have, and we will jump over to our Q&A screen so we can take a look. So please do share anything there, and give me a moment. I will get the questions answered, get the questions open. So if you bear with me just a moment. So a question about the 20% reduction target. David, I'll push this one back to you. Is the 20% reduction by 2030 across all scopes? Short answer, yes, but longer answer, David, would you just like to talk about all the areas that it does cover?
Well, it does cover all 3 scopes. Scope 1 and 2 for us are very, very small anyway, a tiny proportion. It covers all 3 scopes. And what do you want to say, Anna? More than that?
What's within your scope 3 that you've included?
Everything. Well, I mean, participant travel is what you're asking me, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, what's included, I mean, it aligns with obviously the net zero carbon events measurement advice, but what actually sits within that categorically?
Yeah, well, so we have looked at our entire boundary, and we have assessed participant travel, by which we mean exhibitors and attendees and visitors and speakers. Everyone who attends the show, because they add value to the show, we believe that they are within our accountability. Yeah.
And then that also looks at kind of you've got everything else in there in terms of materials you're using, your own production, transportation, food, those sorts of things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, Anna. Again, this is all on the website. So our inventory and our boundaries, etc., are published on the website. So feel free to have a look anyway.
Thank you. Another question regarding the 20% target is interested in the decision to set a 20% reduction by 2030. Does this figure lie on a mapped pathway to achieve net zero by 2050, or is this an isolated short-term target?
It is not an isolated short-term target. We have a target for 2050 as well, which is 50% reduction by 2050.
Yeah, and that does sit on a mapped pathway. So one of the things that we did with IMEX is to actually build a decarbonisation pathway that models a few different scenarios. So we've got the 20% target by 2030 as the first milestone, with a mapped reduction pathway right through to 2050. I think the important thing that's also included within that decarbonisation pathway is growth. So the reality is that as a business, as an organization, there is an intention to grow commercially and within reason, the size of the show. We have mapped that out against the decarbonisation pathway to show to reach 20% reduction in absolute emissions. Taking into account IMEX's growth intentions, this means that the curve has to deepen slightly. So it has been built in with growth in mind, with a short-term target of 2030, but with a longer-term trail. I think until, from our perspective, modelling a 2050 90% reduction is something that we can do. It's not a particularly practical thing to do. It doesn't help in the near term, and it didn't feel like it aligned with this concept of being in the moment. So whilst the long term is there, the short term is 20%, is the 20% and decided based on all the data and all the insights. Sorry, let me just go through these questions. Got a question. Do you offer any additional discounts or support to exhibitors who provide detailed carbon analysis or companies that demonstrate sustainable practices? David, I don't know.
No, we don't. We don't offer discounts. Support in terms of advice is something that we're looking at doing, but we wouldn't look to discount or penalise. I think we want people to do this for the right reasons, and better standards is a good place to start. There will be more to come. I mean, with all of this, we are very much at the start of the journey, right? So there's a lot of detail that we need to work out. At the moment, we've got a direction of travel, but a lot of the tactical delivery is being worked out as we speak. So more to come in this area, and the comms piece that Anna spoke about, the leadership and content marketing, etc., that will come. It's already started, so more to come in that respect.
Yeah. And just to kind of follow on that question with regards to support, everybody has been provisioned sort of a measurement page on Trace so that they can easily provide their information. It's structured in what they need, and there is someone at IMEX who's supporting contractors to kind of complete all of that data. So there's definitely support for measurement. How that data is sort of played back to exhibitors is yet to be decided, and how perhaps it can bolster the better stand certificates and so on. But yeah, it's something that is being actively considered at the moment. We've got a couple more questions. Do keep dropping them in if you have them come up. So let me just have a quick look. Sorry. I mean, we've got an interesting question that's probably not a question to be answered by you, David, but just a thought. Venues and exhibition organisers insist on fire-rated materials. Why don't you commit to a zero to landfill materials strategy? For example, if they can't recycle their materials, they won't be allowed. I think there's lots of interesting discussion in there to have. But David, do you have any thoughts on kind of? Would you have any thoughts on that? Any reflections on that and prohibiting materials, for example?
It's a really interesting point. I mean, it's beyond my technical expertise, that's for sure. But that's the sort of thing that's a really interesting point. It's the sort of thing that we want to try and build into our standards going forward. So let me take that one away and talk to the team about it.
Yeah. I think to that point as well, there are materials that are evidently can be built. Sorry, booths can be built from 100% recycled materials, and I know who's asked this question. I can think of some of the materials that you might have in mind. And I definitely think that that is an option for a lot of booth, sorry, what's the word? Shell scheme booths, changing the type of materials that are being used, etc. I think when you are looking at high end, high quality, sometimes double booth, double layer, space only exhibitor booths, the reality is that not everything can be built from recyclable materials. There's a lot of infrastructural challenges associated with how booths are built and therefore what materials can be used. And it's also important to remember that just because a material can be recycled does not mean that it will be recycled. So I think a big thing from that strategy is about driving circularity. That's the key word. It's not about driving recyclability. It's about driving a circular ecosystem where nothing is necessarily going into waste or being recycled, but is again being reused over and over and over again. So I think just to expand on that a little bit, there are some straightforward answers, and then there are some not straightforward answers as well, which is why it's complicated. Yeah. Okay, let's have a little look. We've got some higher question, David, and I don't know what the answer is to this one, actually. I'm not sure there is one right at this moment in time, but what kind of incentives are you offering to encourage people to travel via train rather than flying to IMEX?
That's something we're working on right now. We are looking to have some incentives. I'm not going to spoil the surprise by going into it right now. We are looking at different sorts of things, whether that's... No, I won't say anymore. We're looking at it.
Oh, I hope you'll tell me. I'll keep my... This one's clearly a secret from me as well, which is quite exciting. And I think just to make that point is that we've worked very closely with IMEX to design a strategy, and part of that is about designing how it's implemented. Big piece for us as an organisation, ISLA, is not just to hand over a strategy and say off you go. It's about making sure that's connected through to all the different teams and how it actually plays out. So we want to be able to empower IMEX to go away and deliver this strategy, not constantly rely on outside support and outside resource to deliver it. So, It is exciting from my perspective to hear that some of that's already underway, and I will be asking you.
Can I just jump back in and talking about trains more generally, because part of it is maybe incentives, part of it is also just making it easier and even just making it more visible to people that it's an option to take the train. And I give you the example of the IMEX team ourselves, because in 2025, for the trip to Frankfurt, something like 3% of the team traveled by train, the rest flew. For 2026, that increased to, I think it was 40-ish%. So 3% to 40%, huge increase in train uptake, purely because we made it more visible to the team and said, please consider this. It wasn't mandatory, it was completely choice-based. But the point is there were no incentives either. We could have said, and here's an amount of money, or here's a day off, or whatever, but we didn't feel that was the right thing to do. We wanted to make it available and to let people choose. And purely by doing that, without any incentives, we got that huge uptake. So yes, maybe incentives, and we are looking at that, but I think it's also about ease of use and visibility as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. A lot of solutions already exist. It's just making them known and making them normal, and making them, the default option where it's an option. Yeah. There are a couple of questions that have come through that are on the same vein. So I won't ask them exactly as they've come through, but I guess there's questions around Las Vegas as a location, and also comments on, the geographic of location of the events determining the size of participant emissions from travel. I guess a big question really within those is, you've obviously chosen Las Vegas as a destination. Is there no other city that could offer better transport routes for you?
Las Vegas works for us, and we are committed to Vegas until 2030, contractually at least. We have no plans to change that. It works very well from a transport point of view. It's a good hub airport, and it's a good venue. So for all the normal reasons, it's a good solution for us. Beyond that, I'm sure we'll look beyond that, but as things stand, we have no plans to change.
Yeah, reasonable. I think it's been a good partnership for IMEX, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. I'm just looking at the last questions. We've got another few minutes, so if you do have more, drop them in now. But let me just go through. David, have you noticed, you may not yourself, your team may have done and anecdotally, but have you noticed whether exhibitors are being more conscious about what they bring to events? Have you noticed any changes in, their swag or giveaways or things that they're offering? Is that become more conscious across the show, do you think?
Difficult to say. I mean, there's still quite a lot of swag being given out. I don't have any data on it. It feels that maybe there's slightly less. I think it goes through phases as well. I think there was a phase where everyone was giving a recyclable bottle, for example, because they thought that was the right thing to do. That seems to have tailed off a little bit as well. So difficult to say. We don't have the data. We don't measure it. It's purely observational, but it feels like it hasn't changed materially to me.
Mm. It's an interesting one as well, I think, just objectively, because I think, again, one could make an argument, say, well, why doesn't IMEX just ban those things? And I think there's we know that everybody wants choice, and I think that's a very important thing for people, but it's also a big question around where is the biggest material impact? Is it in the swag items, or is it actually in the booths themselves? And the broad data suggests that obviously it's within the large scale items and resources that make up most of the footprint, in which the emissions and the waste are the problem factor. So I think that again comes down to the big component of the strategy, which is focusing on the things that matter most according to your footprint. And obviously, again, that's the travel component and the booth component. So that's the focus there.
Yeah.
Have a question. Again, I imagine this is in the works, but how will you be engaging with hosted buyer programs and coordinators to encourage them to bring guests by train in Europe? Is there any work there?
This is in the works, absolutely. And some hosted buyer programs or some hosted buyer groups have been very proactive in this area. So some already do encourage travel by train, but it's not consistent across the board. So I think it's about, again, that education piece about these are the options for you to travel by train. I think people just need the data. They need the data around the time, the journey time, the cost, etc., and then they can take a view on it. I know that some companies are mandating more of this anyway, and I know that some of our German colleagues have companies where train travel is mandatory within Germany, for example. So some of it is coming from corporates, including hosted buyer corporates, driving this. So it's a mixture of corporate policies on one side, us making things more visible on the other side, and just asking the question. So a lot is going on in this area.
There's a couple of questions that I will answer. So one of them is about a question about by recovery, do you mean waste to energy or recycling? I'm assuming that this question is related to the circularity goal and reducing waste. By recovery, we mean retention of materials and reuse of materials as they are intended, without them going to incineration or going into recycling. We want to recovery in this context of circularity means keeping the good as it is within the ecosystem it already operates in, not sending it to recycling, sending it to a bin, sending it to waste to energy, or even sending it to donation. It's how do you keep it operating within the exhibition industry ecosystem. So I think just to be clear on that one, I hope that's the right meaning of the question. There's another question as well, which I think I can probably answer on your behalf, David, but correct me if I'm wrong. There's a question today: have you explored sustainable aviation fuel as part of an incentive or reduction for the Las Vegas show? It's working for Formula One. I would say no, unless you've gone off and done that yourself, David, outside of work with Isla.
I haven't, no.
No, that's not something. But Luke, who has asked that question, if you did want to contact us and send any information over about that we can learn from, you can send it to me, Anna@weareisla.co.uk, and we can explore that a little bit further. I'd be interested to learn more about what it means to say working for Formula One.
Yep.
Another question that's come through, which I think I can probably answer again, David, but correct me if I'm wrong. Has the introduction of better stands led to a measurable reduction in waste volumes, and how has the concept been implemented in practice? I can certainly answer the first part of that question, which is that the waste hasn't historically been measured, and therefore it's not possible to ascertain whether a reduction in waste has been made. But that all sits within the goal to measure exhibitor booths and exhibitor participation in Trace this year, so that we can start comparing that information. But the question about how has the concept of better stands been implemented in practice, David, do you have any words on that one specifically?
I'm not sure what to add to what we've said previously, but we did a full audit this year of all stands for better stands. We have just in the last week or so been issuing the certificates to the exhibitors and stand builders with their results, whether they're gold, silver, bronze, etc. And we're going to continue with that. I think I would say on better stands, this is the first year we've done it in that way with the full process of issuing certificates, etc. And I think it's a big learning for everyone concerned, not least people who'd never heard of it before. So I think there was a good uptake, a lot of interest in it, and a lot of, as I said earlier, competition and willingness to show some ambition to improve things. So it's just going to continue to evolve. We're going to do the same for our Vegas show in a month or two's time, and we'll do the same for Frankfurt next year. So this is just going to keep growing from here.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that in terms of implementation, Better Stands does have a website. You can see what the process is involved. IMEX has worked with a partner to do the build up assessment, and then the de-rig and breakdown assessment. So it's quite a lengthy process. It does require visibility by people and an assessment on that basis. So I think it's just worth mentioning that it's an audited process through looking and engaging on site. It's not just an assessment of stand drawings, for example. So I think that's something to bear in mind.
And to add to that, and it obviously comes at a cost as well. So Anna, you were saying a lot about investing in sustainability. This was a real investment and not a small one, but we felt it was the right thing to do to have this data and to drive this progress. So we think it's a good return on investment.
Great. Well, that has, I think, covered most of the questions. We don't have time to get to absolutely everything, but we've got all the ones that have been upvoted at least. So I guess just from myself, thank you very much for joining. David, any last closing words?
Just to say thank you to everyone who's joined. Thank you to you, Anna, for running this and for all your work on the strategy. Much appreciated.
Thank you. And a massive thank you to Crowdcoms, who are our webinar partner. They have provided the seamless experience for us today, and our marketing team love working with them. So thank you very much once again, Crowdcoms, for a very smooth webinar experience. Appreciated. Thank you, everybody. Please do get in touch with us if you've got any more questions or any reflections. Do remember that you can get started with your measurement journey with Trace as well. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon or morning, wherever you find yourself in the world.